Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
This week at Safeway, shop the 10 for $10 produce sale. With the 10 for $10 produce sale, get items like large avocados, mangoes, green, red, orange, or yellow bell peppers, cucumbers, large lemons, or 16-ounce bags of Signature Farms baby-peeled carrots for the member price of just $1 each. Plus, select meats like Signature Farms 80% lean ground beef and Signature Select extra meaty pork loin back ribs are buy one, get one free this week. Hurry in before these deals are gone. Visit Safeway.com for more deals.
Yeah, the nest is back, baby, for 2021. There may be lockdown in Melbourne right now where my co-host Drew Jones is, but that ain't stopping the nest from getting on the board for this year as we build up to another big season of West Coast Eagles football. Drewy, hello to you, mate. How are you holding up amid all the doom and gloom in Victoria today?
Yeah, I'm up and about for the podcast, no doubt about that. I'll worry about the lock-in when that comes around. But yeah, somber day in Victoria, but... for our West Coast fans, for our Nest listeners, all is good in WA right now. So, and footy season not far away. So we should be excited because it's going to be a big year, 2021 for West Coast.
That it most certainly is, and we'll get to some of the reasons for that in a moment. People in the West, the majority of our listeners, let's be honest, are from the West, and they've been through it all recently, so they know what it's all about. Quite funny, though, because the Eagles and Dockers just went through 5 days of isolated training, and I did have a few of my Victorian mates saying if it was extended, we shouldn't have to go through it as well. It shouldn't be any sort of equalisation. Your Premier decided on this. Your Premier is acting in that way. Bad luck, Eagles and Dockers. The shoe's on the other foot now, Victorian teams, and you'll be doing the isolated training. So I dare say some of the gobs might be just a little bit quieter now.
I wonder if this is a consistent thing, whether the AFL are going to have to land on something a little bit more regimented across the competition. But I guess, they'll be training in pairs for the next 5 days, or if they had a weekend away planned, they'll be stuck at home. So, look, they're professionals. They've been through it all last year, so I'll be fine.
It's not a big deal in the scheme of things. Right, big show ahead. We're going to have a chat with Steve Allan from Channel 10 in Perth. He's going to give us a rails ride on the Eagles training session so far, some of the news from inside the camp, what he's been observing following the Eagles. So that'll be good for our listeners to find out exactly what's going on the training paddock at the moment for our boys. And of course, there are a couple of big injury concerns that we'll touch on. We're also going to go through some of your responses to the Twitter question that we posed on the veteran that you would like in the AFL, Tom Brady-esque, if you don't mind, following on from his exploits for Tampa Bay, leading them to the Super Bowl. We'll go through a couple of the options there. There's been some Willie Rioli news. Kane Cornes has opened up. We got onto it on Twitter yesterday as well, and there was an amazing response. I mean, people are just fuming about this now. You can tell that it's starting to transcend West Coast as well, Drewy. So we'll touch on that a little bit as well. But what we thought we'd start the show with today are our 3 early season headlines for the Eagles. So the headlines that we think are going to be talking points in the early part of the season, which isn't too far away now. So let's go one for one, Drewy. Kick it off with yours first. Your first one.
Rouse revenge. So round 1, we've got Gold Coast Suns at home. And let's be honest, an 18-year-old who played about 100 minutes of footy gave us an absolute lesson last season. I reckon Luke Shuey, Tim Kelly, Dom Shee, Jack Redden, and everyone who even put their toe in the midfield during that match should feel like they've got a score to settle with Matty Rowell. He's 18. I know he's a phenom, number 1 pick, and he had a sensational start to last season, but we shouldn't be beaten up by an 18-year-old in the midfield. Don't forget, there was also, Noah Anderson and a few other young guys running around in that midfield as well. West Coast could and should have a point to prove against the Suns in round 1. And we cannot let that happen again, because we all know when you get the Suns early in the season, that's the opportunity to lose to them. They don't win games after about July. So let's make sure we put them away, and I want to see big performances from, the much vaunted big names in our midfield, with the help of Nick Naitanui, and put Rao back in his place.
Yeah, I like it. So my first one flows on from that. My first headline early on in the season is King Kelly. I think Timmy will start superbly. He copped a little bit of criticism for the way he went about it last season. He was inconsistent. The expectations were enormous and maybe he didn't match them. But as I said in a previous podcast, he was better than he got credit for. He played some big games. He was just up and down. And then, of course, the final against the Pies wasn't great. I just got a feeling he starts superbly. I just think he starts like a freight train and really gets the Eagles going and has some consistency to match those brilliant performances. So King Kelly is my first headline. My second one, Drewy, before you give us your second, flows on a little bit from what you said about the Gold Coast game, and it is West Coast write-off. So I think there'll be the knives out for the Eagles early on. We've got a very tough start to the season. If you look at the way the Eagles' schedule is in the first 6 games, it's Gold Coast, which I think we should win, and then it's the Dogs away, Port Adelaide, St Kilda away, Collingwood, Geelong away. It is a really tough start to the season. I reckon we could be 3-3, which would be a reasonable position to be in after those 6 games. But watch the knives come out saying the Eagles are done. They can't match it with the best teams anymore. They can't win the flag. Look at our schedule after that. Look at how it opens up. Freo, Hawthorn, Adelaide, GWS, Essendon, Carlton. I reckon we win at least 4 of those 6 games.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, watch the narrative change. The Eagles are back. The Eagles are back. Simpson's got them going again. Watch out for West Coast because people are just reactive, right? They don't look ahead. They go week by week. So I think early on it'll be West Coast write-off, and then we'll start changing the tune on that by going on a good run when the schedule opens up a bit.
Yeah, I did look at the early season schedule and think the first 3 games will be really interesting. Dogs away will be tough, but winnable on a flat track at Marvel Stadium. You like playing there. And then Port Adelaide at home.
Tough game.
Tough game no matter where it is. You'd almost prefer it in Adelaide because we've never lost to Port at Adelaide Oval. Saints again, probably, I guess that's Marvel Stadium as well. We'll belt Collingwood at home. The Pies.
I think we'll beat Collingwood, and Cats away is extremely difficult.
We never win, but who knows? Things maybe things could be a bit different. Dangerfield injured to start the season, etc. All right, Oscar's World. I think Oscar Allan stamps himself even further this season as a rising star of the competition, mostly in WA because the Victorians will probably ignore it, you would think. We know how good he's going to be, and he literally gets better almost every time you watch him play. And I'm interested to see what his role is this season. Do we have Bailey Williams in the side? Apparently he's been training quite well. He does offer something different in the ruck. When you think that we're essentially conceding when we have Oscar Allan in the middle. And then obviously the minutes for Nick Naitanui, we don't know how much game time he's going to play now that we're back out to full quarters. So, Oscar on the ball a lot more while we'll lose the hit-outs, Garby. Having him around the ball a lot is a good thing because his footy IQ's through the roof, can take marks, can do it all, great hands. So, Oscar's World.
I thought about Oscar for a headline, but the one that I've gone for, my third headline, does flow on from what you've been saying. It is Big Bad Bustling Bailey. So I reckon Bailey Williams is a big show for the second ruck spot. To be honest, I'm actually not that confident about it. I just wanted to say Big Bad Bustling Bailey because I reckon it could be a great nickname for us. I mean, you could go either way when it comes to the second ruck option right now. They may still go with Oscar Allan. Vardy, if he's fit and up and going, is obviously a viable option, but Bailey Williams would be well and truly in the mix as well. The reason why it changes now is because the game length has been extended. So playing Oscar Allan as the second ruck and Naitanui for 80% of the game is not really something that is as tempting as it was last season. Now you're looking at giving Nick a bit more of a rest, and that means you play a second ruck potentially and keep Oscar up forward, especially if JK has some early season injury worries, which has been some of the talk. But I like Bailey Williams getting a go, and I love the nickname if he does, Nest family. Big Bad Bustling Bailey. Yes, it's a copy of Barry Hall, but it works for our up-and-coming ruckman as well.
All right, so my last one, it's not necessarily a headline, but it's a storyline, which is Duggan through the midfield as Witherden sort of takes on and becomes that controlling kick out of the back line. So
that's the longest headline in newspaper history, Drewy.
It's not a headline, it's a storyline. So I think with Yo injured, I think that probably means that Duggan's going to start the season in the midfield. I think it really worked last year. So Duggan as a mid, and that just opens up the slot for Witherden to go into the back line. And then you don't have to worry too much about doing a lot of juggling. And then you can work out, is it Rotherham? Do we want him in the team all the time, or do you go for someone smaller? All those sort of permutations can be worked out. And guess one we've just missed out on there is Zachy Langdon as well. Excited to see what he can do. There's a lot of things to look forward to, but that's just a taste.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Duggan goes through the midfield. Simo said he'll get a chance there in the preseason games. I think he's trying to play it down a little bit, Simo. I think he knows that Duggan's a really strong midfield option because of what he saw last season. They drafted him as a mid, and they got so many halfbacks. I mean, it makes sense that he pushes through there. But I think he just wants to take a bit of pressure off him rather than having all the eyes on Duggan in the midfield assessing how he goes. I think it's a common sense approach that will probably happen. So, yeah, I'm with you on that one. So, yeah, we'll watch that closely and we'll see what happens in that regard. But I think it's certainly a good storyline. Right, let's find out what's been happening on the track, though, and then we'll talk a bit about it afterwards. So, Drew, you caught up with Steve Allan from Channel 10. He's been watching the Eagles closely. Let's throw to that chat now and see exactly what's been going on with our boys as they prepare for season 2021.
All right, let's head west and catch up with Channel 10 reporter Steve Allan. Steve, you'd be well known to people on the Nest, I reckon, for your work at West Coast training previously. And welcome to the Nest.
Pleasure to be here.
So just for a little background on Stevie, I used to play footy with him. And yes, he wore a headband marauding out on the wing at Barrandar Oval for Willerton. Is it too late to be an SPP selection at West Coast for you, Steve?
I would think so. I'm in pretty ordinary nick these days, and I don't have the hair that I used to catch the eye.
So you're 0 for 2, basically.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that you've gone straight to the hairdo off the top, that's my on-field legacy at Willerton.
Yeah, well, my legacy also probably isn't related to any skills on the footy field either. Steve, let's get to West Coast matters. We wanted to speak to someone who's on the grounds, and you're at West Coast training at the time of recording on Wednesday morning. Can we just get an update? I guess Elliot Yeo's the big one that we're all interested in. How's he going with his OP?
Now, I guess West Coast aren't hiding from it. In Adam Simpson's words this morning, he's more unlikely than likely for round one. And I think even that's been kind. When we spoke to Simo about a fortnight ago, they said, the next key for Elliot was to do the side-to-side movement, which they were stepping up to at the time. And no one's used the word setback, but since that time, where we've just seen Elliot back to jogging laps of the oval. So he's sort of gone backwards a bit. They say he's making progress, but yeah, I have my doubts on him playing in the earlier part of the season.
And even if he does get up to play, you'd think he's going to be pretty sort of underprepared to play his best footy.
100%, absolutely right. I mean, really missed a chunk towards the end of last season, and the club didn't act on surgery immediately. They still had hopes of him playing a part in their finals campaign, which didn't eventuate. So, yeah, he's a long way back.
Yeah, fingers crossed he can get that right sooner rather than later. Just sort of keeping tabs on various little niggles. It sounds like over the last sort of fortnight, Josh Kennedy, Luke Shuey and Andrew Gaff have all sort of spent time away from main training. How are the veterans going?
Interesting one. So they sort of are saying that they're all in the clear, and we saw Luke Shuey integrate himself into main session earlier in the week. although I must say today he snuck off quietly, so it wasn't in the intense stuff. Josh Kennedy, they're not worried about. They're saying it's a calf niggle, and they expect him to be back into the swing of things by the end of the week. But from what we saw today, he was just really walking laps, and he has been doing that with Jake Waterman, who is again unsighted today. He's had a bit of a back issue, but it don't seem to be injuries that West Coast are overly concerned with. We've seen Jackson Nelson, for some reason, kept away from the main group as well, though it must be said that he looks like he's moving pretty well, so I'm sort of not even really listing him amongst the concerns, but just to give people a feel for who's about and who's not, and that's the lay of the land at the moment.
So interesting time of year for West Coast and also for prospective AFL players not on a list at the moment because of the way they've cut back lists, and particularly in West Coast case, having a couple of players in Rioli and Venables unavailable, it means that they're actually a little bit short of numbers. So there are some players training with the team at the moment. So Nick Martin from Subiaco, Cedric Cox, the former Brisbane Lion, and Will Collins from Swan Districts. Now, I guess that they're not familiar faces, so you may have struggled to pick them out a little bit. But have you garnered anything from them at training?
Interesting you ask. Let me think of it. Just off the top, Daniel Venables has been training recently, which is great to see. It's been a long absence, and they're hopeful still that he can partake in something down the track. But Adam Simpson said that they're holding him back at the moment, though, whether he plays or not is sort of in the hands of his doctors. So wait and see on Daniel. As for the other trio you mentioned, we only got our first look at Will Collins today because he had a minor injury, in weeks previous. So he's only just made his way onto the track. I would put Will, just from my eye, as the least likely of the trio. No offence to him, but he's just sort of appears a bit more slightly built. Cedric Cox has obviously been around for a bit, so looks the most comfortable out there, and he's obviously got that spot on West Coast waffle list as is. So he's a little bit more in the system. I don't know whether that puts him ahead or not. And then Subiaco forward, look, they seem to think Nick Martin is an option. I've heard anecdotally that he would be the leading contender, but you just don't know. I think it might be horses for courses and what they need. Again, and not really sure how serious West Coast are about adding a player at this stage. But it's just an opportunity for them to have a look. And I guess nice for those guys to know that they're on radar.
Yeah, Simo said it was a bit like hard knocks. Someone will get a tap on the shoulder eventually. So it should be quite interesting to see if anyone does make the list. Now, just quickly before I let you go, Steve, having been at some West Coast training sessions over the pre-season, has anyone caught your eye, anyone we should be aware of who might be working themselves into sort of the best 22 for round one?
Well, the obvious ones are Alex Witherden and Zach Langdon. Zach Langdon especially, I feel like the spots are there for those guys. I guess with Elliot Yeo, it's not unthinkable, but Liam Duggan, so he's gone up a gear. Liam Duggan, if he gets into the middle through Elliot Yeo's absence early, that probably opens up an opportunity for Alex Witherden. So I guess those trio are guys who have caught my eye. But if I can mention one through a body of work, big Harry Edwards fan, got his debut last year, didn't really go well for him, and he ended up concussed out of that one. Is up against it with, I guess, as a key defender, but really can't always like what I see from him. Never know if he's going to get the full opportunity at the next level. But there's a guy who I think West Coast fans should just be happy is on the list. And the other one is Bailey Williams. It just feels like the talent's there, but is he going to get the opportunity? Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. I mean, If you've got Nick-Nat, taking the bulk of the ruck load, maybe going back to extended quarters this year might give them a bit more opportunity to play him up forward a bit and chop out in the ruck.
So I'm interested just on one more. The battle for that sort of small forward position. Obviously, Liam Ryan has one of those spots locked away, and I guess it depends how you want to classify Jamie Cripps. But you mentioned Langdon there, but Jermaine Jones and Brendan Archie, do you get the feeling that it's probably 3 into 1?
Yeah, good question. Look, I would have thought Zach Langdon is going to be there. I don't know what that then means for Brendan Archie. Jones, I obviously got a quick look at last year. I just would expect Langdon to be ahead of him. How does that shape up? I just don't know. I don't like the fact that Zach Langdon keeps talking about this midfield time. I think if you've got his talent and the availability, they've been crying out for a forward. You just put your hand up and say, Simo, I'll kick goals. Give me a go.
Yeah, well, Simo's big on pick. He wants to pick 6 forwards, right? And I think Langdon, he fits into that mix perfectly. And we've been trying to fill a spot with Willie out of the side. So I think Zach being plugged in as part of that front 6 sort of makes a lot of sense. Steve, we appreciate your time on the Nest, mate. Thanks for the update. I'll be calling you throughout the season to get the latest on the ground in Perth. We appreciate it.
Yeah, pleasure, Joe. I hope you're wiser for what I've had to say, and not the other way.
Well, when we chat non-footy, I think I end up less wise, but when we talk West Coast, I think we're headed the right direction.
Thanks for having me.
Nice to hear from Steve Allan. So Elliot Yeo's the concern, obviously, Drewy, and it's a massive concern that he could miss potentially the first month as he recovers from this groin injury.
Doesn't sound like he's making great progress. Like Steve said there, that it almost is like, if it's not regression, that it's certainly plateauing with his recovery. So the fact that it's like sometimes you see him trying to do some change of direction and sort of ramp it up a bit, and then you're at the next training session when you're allowed in and he's only walking laps. It's hard to get a gauge whether he's actually making progress, but it doesn't feel like he is. So the fact that West Coast put off surgery last season because they were still hopeful that he might be able to play a role in the finals, you can understand why they wanted to take that gamble, but it's probably setting them back a little bit now. And unfortunately, midfield's not an area where we have a huge amount of depth. So that does mean we're stretched a little bit thin. You know, you get a couple of hamstrings early in the season or something, and all of a sudden, you know, we're back where we were last season. So hopefully that doesn't happen. And like, let's not forget, like, this guy is an absolute jet. Like, he's an all-Australian mid. He goes both ways, lays big tackles, can kick 60-metre long bomb goals. One of the most versatile two-way midfielders in the competition, can take hangers as well. So, yeah, he's a key cog in our team, but we're also missing a superstar player. So, yeah, it's frustrating.
He's our most important midfielder and arguably our most important player. You could probably throw a few others up from that category, but midfielder, no doubt he's our most important. Now, others can be arguably more brilliant on their day. Shuey, Kelly, Gaff with his body of work. But no one can do what Yo can do, which is play on the opposition's best player, like a Cripps and so on, because he can match them physically and defensively, but then hurt them the other way without having to be a tagger. You just say play on that guy, and he does it because that's his style. But then he's still so effective in an offensive sense. So it's an enormous blow, and we saw it at the end of last season. So hopefully he comes back. I mean, it does again put the microscope on a couple of players to step up in his absence, and that is, you know, Dom Sheed and Jack Redden. I mean, Sheed on his day is a match winner, but he's up and down, and he lacks some consistency. And I think Redden's got a bigger question mark on him going into the season than any other Eagles player. Like, you think maybe he could be squeezed out. You know, if everyone's available and a couple of the other youngsters come on, like Witherden delivers, and then you're playing Rotherham and Nelson potentially, and Duggan's going okay in the midfield. Redden's the one who could make way. Like, I think it's a really big season for him. And if Yo's not there for the first month, which seems likely, I think he really has to deliver to potentially save his Eagles career.
He hasn't got like a lot of weapons. Redden. So, like, he has to be getting to every contest, like making the best use of his kicks and handballs when he gets the ball. Like, he needs to tick every box because there's nothing in his game that he does exceptionally well. Like, when his Brisbane days, sometimes he'd have 25 or 30 and lay 10 tackles, but those days are clearly over. So, I think you're right, though. He's definitely in the team round one as things stand. And let's hope that he can find his 2018 form, because he had a great season off the back of being given that extra midfield time when Pritis and Mitchell go out. So hopefully he can play a big role for us. But no Yo in the early part of the season certainly going to hurt us, especially against those big teams. He makes a difference in those games where, and ultimately we know, having missed out on the top four on percentage the last two seasons, that you can write off a game and a loss or a big loss and say, well, we'll get it next week. But actually, no, you need to bank the wins and keep that percentage nice and high. The other ones there, just to touch on, sounds like almost all of our senior players seem to have had some sort of little hamstring niggle or something during the pre-season. I would caution Nest fans and West Coast fans about being too concerned about this. I think that part of having a big, heavy pre-season is actually at some stage probably getting a little niggle like that. And the fact that you have to end up sitting out a few sessions is probably not a massive deal in the scheme of things. It's not like they've done a grade 3 hammy and are missing 6 weeks. So as much as there's a lot of talk day to day and week to week about players missing sessions, I don't think it's too big a deal in the scheme of things. So I think ultimately, apart from Yo, we're looking pretty good for round one.
The only one that worried me a little bit is the Josh Kennedy one, because he's in, potentially the final season of his career. I mean, he's a year-to-year proposition. So, his last couple of pre-seasons have been really strong. Now that he's got a little niggle in this one, you start to worry. You think, well, if that becomes a 2-weeker and then he picks up another one after that, then you start wondering if injuries get the better of him and, this season starts to be a decline for him and then he potentially retires halfway through. Like, that's a possibility. It can come that quickly for a player of JK's age who's been around for so long. So I hope it doesn't happen that way, and there's a good chance it doesn't. But when you start seeing that, you go, I'm a little bit worried there.
Did I read that he had a sore back?
That was Jake Waterman. I think Kennedy had a calf or a lower leg injury. Jake's had a sore back, but I mean, a young player with a sore back, you'll be right.
I was going to say, Josh Kennedy sore back, that doesn't sound good. That sounds like an old...
But, he had a niggle of some sort. So hopefully he's okay, but that's one you start to worry about a little bit. So anyway, that's one to watch. Let's get on to the Willie Rioli issue before we get on to the Twitter question that you put out about the veteran the Eagles would like. So, Kane Corns has fired up about it, which I think is great. And that's a sign that this issue is starting to annoy people so much that it's transcending. It's going beyond the Eagles. And other people are saying, what the hell is going on? It's been 18 months now, and they still haven't come up with a punishment for Willie Rioli. It's madness. We thought we'd know in December. We're now hitting mid-February, and the Eagles are saying we are none the wiser. And obviously they're working behind closed doors and annoying the AFL and ASADA for something, and they're getting nothing in response. It's just beyond comprehension that they can treat someone like this. So it's starting to wake other people up in the business, not just West Coast fans and the WA media and football followers.
It's amazing how it sort of comes into the news cycle and we grumble about it, and then sort of a month or 6 weeks passes and we all go on with our lives, and then we sort of check back in and we're like, we still haven't heard anything? Like, when was the last time we talked about this? And when was the last time we had an update? But the amazing thing about it is that we haven't really had an update of any sort. We had the hearing in December and it was like, all right, hopefully we'll know pretty soon. And then Simo gets asked about it in his first press conference of the year, which was pretty early in January. And he's like, yeah, we think probably by the end of the month, he's struggling. He really needs to know and get on with his life, whichever way it falls. And then you have another press conference at the start of February. And again, it's the same question. And it's pretty much the same answer. It's like, yeah, we're hoping by the end of the month. So I actually rung a friend of mine who deals especially in sports law and has done for most of his law career. And I was like, is there something here that, like, can West Coast file some sort of grievance against Asada here? Like, have they been reticent in their duty? Like, what is this doing to Willie Rioli, like, on a human, emotional level?
Yeah, what did he say?
And why is it taking so long? He said that it's everything that happens with law, and even though this is not a case of, necessarily breaking the law, he's broken rules, everything just takes, so long. And so you can file a grievance or some sort of injunction or whatever it might be. I don't know all the law lingo. And these things just take so long. And that's what he made the point. It's like West Coast could ask for something specifically and have to go to a tribunal or a judge or something. And that actually takes 3 or 4 months at least. Yeah. But my big question to him was, and what is taking so long? Like, why have we not seen the B sample? Why is it not? This feels like, isn't it quite simple? Like,
what are they doing? What, if you're working for Asada, what are you doing? Like someone said on Twitter the other day, maybe they have more pressing issues. I think they were referring to the AFL. But no, this is their job, right? To deal with drug cheats. Now, Willie cheated. No one's excusing what he did. He deserves the punishment. How can it take 18 months to come to it? What are you actually doing? It's not like he come up with some systemic, East German drug program or like a Lance Armstrong type cycling system to cheat the system. Like, it was obvious what he did. We know what he did. Give him a punishment. How is it that hard?
Yeah.
So it's just utterly ridiculous. And I think people are understandably incredulous now. And Kane Corn said it's one of the biggest travesties in the AFL. That's maybe taking it a little bit far, but you can sum it up in that sense, because it's just inhumane, I think, is how I called it before. And I don't think that's too harsh of a term when you consider what it's doing to Willie.
Yeah. So the bit that I still don't quite understand is the B sample. Like, the B sample exists on the day. Like, you've got it. And so they was like, we'll go test the B sample. It's like, well, what are you testing it for? He cut it with an energy drink. Everyone knows that. So I don't fully understand it. There's still questions that need to be answered, and maybe we'll never know everything behind it. But what the friend of mine who's a sports lawyer did say is, he's like, if West Coast could file some sort of grievance, then it would happen. But I just don't think there's any grounds for it. So I think they're just kind of stuck waiting. Like, Asada will just do what they do. And yeah, unfortunately, that's just the way it has to be. And just one other thing on that. He did point out that Asada would rush through certain cases when there's a really strong timeline. So, for instance, an Olympic athlete or a potential Olympian, if it happened in the year leading up to an Olympics, they would try to reach a resolution by the time they have to do a qualifying event to get to the Olympics. With this one, the likelihood is that Willie was always going to receive a 2-year ban. Yeah. So there's really no rush necessarily to get it done before that 2 years, even though, and I'm not saying I agree with it, it's clearly hurting his mental state. Whether behind the scenes they've said to him, the minimum here is 2 years. So no matter what we do, you're going to miss 2 years of footy. And if we announce it towards the back end of the 2 years, then it means essentially we've backdated it and you'll be back, whatever. But yeah, I think the chances of him playing this season are very slim. And we can say that.
Clearly. Madness. Utter madness, how that organisation operates. Right, let's get to some better news. And the question we put out during the week, which was on the back of Tom Brady, which veteran would you like to see come to the Eagles for a year or two to give us a crack at a flag like Tom Brady delivered for Tampa Bay in the Super Bowl? So there's a few listener responses, which we'll get to, but what's yours, Drewy? Who would you go for as the Tom Brady-esque recruit to West Coast?
Yeah, I think there's a really obvious one, which we'll touch on in a minute, but the one that I've gone for here is Collingwood captain Scott Pendlebury. So I think if there was one area of the field where I feel like we can't have too much of, it's midfield talent. But I also like I like where Pendlebury's at in his career right now, where it's not beyond the realms of possibility that you could put him out on a wing or to the half-back flank. Like, he's good enough, you know. He's a superstar, one of the most consistent players we've seen in the modern era, never gets injured, very smart player, operates well in congestion, all big ticks. And then that's where you're like, all right, Dom Sheed, we love you. You're going to be on the wing all season. We've got Pendlebury. Yeah. Like, we're plugging him in, leadership, experience, class, and try and get us over the line for that flag. That's why I've gone Pendles.
I like it. I'd also like to see Tim Kelly freed up a bit more this season. I think I said it in the aftermath of the Collingwood defeat. I think he should have been moved off the ball. He was getting smashed by Greenwood. Move him to half forward, move him to a wing or something to free him up. Like, that's the luxury of Kelly. He's so comfortable in those areas because he's so quick and he's got such a good eye for goal. I'd like to see him used there a little bit more. If you had someone like that, then obviously you could. But I'm going for Sean Higgins. I know he's just moved to the Cats, but I've been going on about the Eagles' need for a wingman for a while. He's still got pace. He's a wonderful deliverer of the ball and user of the football. So Sean Higgins would be my man to get him in for a couple of years. And that's the worry going into the season, is that there are so many contenders. We are one of them, but the Cats just look stupidly strong with Higgins, Isaac Smith and Jeremy Cameron. I mean, it's going to take some sort of task to knock them off, considering they made a grand final. Now they've added those three players onto their list.
Yeah, they are. They look a bit scary. So some of the responses, Garby, I'll just grab the phone out. Shohan Khan he's posted a GIF of Gary Ablett Jr., so get him out of retirement.
Yeah.
Which I don't hate. I don't mind it. Half forward flank. He's still playing good footy. Shannon Walker, keen for us to get Koch after he, I guess, nearly ended up at West Coast in the 07 draft.
Yeah.
Cochin probably dwindling in terms of his influence when the ball's in his hand, but still, you know, such a leader for Richmond. And his attack on the footy, like, he's tougher than people probably give him credit for. And he is a big game player. Dangerfield has been thrown around. I guess he probably qualifies for the veteran candidate. An absolute wrecking ball, as we know, Danger. Hopefully his groin's still in pieces when we face him in round 6. Sean Burgoyne from Dylan Briotti. Silk, ageless. Big fan of his, but he's dwindling a little. A couple of tongue-in-cheek ones. Sam Mitchell again. Woosha, Dean Kemp, all good options. Joel Selwood from Three Fingers. Vishki. Cyril or Buddy from Chris Hodgetts. And Lee agrees with me. He's gone with Pendles as well. But the one, and a couple of people have mentioned it on Twitter, is the other one is Buddy Franklin. Now, let me make the case for Bud. He has got, 1 year on that Sydney contract after this year?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he barely plays this year and retires halfway through. Like, I can't see the body getting him through it. But anyway.
So what if Bud is like, stuff this. I know I've got anonymity in Sydney, but this is a rebuilding team. I've always wanted to play in front of my friends and family, you know, week in, week out. And West Coast are like, you have to, you say to Bud, you've got to amnesty the last year of your contract and just say, I don't want it because we can't pay it and the Swans sure as hell aren't going to pay it. But so we essentially trade for him and he takes a massive pay cut and we sign him up on a 2-year contract, stick him on the half-forward flank. If Josh Kennedy did retire, and I certainly wouldn't be forcing him out the door so we could get Buddy, but if he did retire, that does open up a spot. And all of a sudden, Lance Franklin's running around the blue and gold. And,
it's a very good decoy option for King Oscar. Like, as long as he stays out of Oscar's way, you know, makes some decoy leads, takes a key defender away so the big man can just, you know, keep developing on his emerging superstar status. I'm all for it, but don't get in the way of Oscar's progression, please.
What about on the wing? Like what Rewalt, Richardson, Jonathan Brown, those three nearly won Brownlow's playing on the wing.
Yeah. Yeah, pinch hit there. I'm not sure the body's going to hold up, but it's a good talking point. Some good options that we've thrown up, and we'd all celebrate seeing Buddy in the Eagles colours, along with the other players that we've mentioned. But let's be honest, it's probably not going to happen. Hey, just quickly though, speaking about recruiting players, we should touch on this. So the Eagles have agreed their salary cap reduction to fit in with the COVID cuts, if you like, and they've all agreed on a 7% cut across the board. And they've sort of got ahead of the game. And it just sums up how professional the Eagles are and how smart they are and the way they operate as a business. And they just usually a step ahead of the other clubs. And I've got on top of this now. The only issue in regards to this, though, is that it could hamstring them a little bit when it comes to trying to recruit a big talent, right? And trying to recruit a big player, because they've basically used up most of the salary cap now with these cuts.
So this was in the in Mark Duffield's article, which originally popped up in the Herald Sun and was only a really small little sort of 6-sentence thing that I read. And it said that in the article that essentially the West Coast, particularly senior players, by taking this pay cut, had sought an assurance that the Eagles wouldn't chase a big fish in the off-season. Now,
how can you do that?
I don't fully understand why that would be, unless the idea is that but by taking this pay cut, it is in a sense freeing up some money, which the Eagles, you don't have to spend all your cap, right? If you spend 92% of your cap, you save that 8%, you can spend it down the road. The Eagles have essentially saving money on their salary cap this year by taking this pay cut, and they're only paying like 95%.
Yeah,
that's good for years in future, and means they don't have to back end a lot of deals. But theoretically, it does also free up extra money that they could use on a recruit next season. So, interesting that they've sought that assurance. I mean, if Paddy Cripps came to West Coast and was like, "I want to come home," surely you'd sit down with Luke Shuey and the rest of the leadership team and be like, "All right, I know that we've agreed to this, but Patrick Cripps is knocking on the door here."
But the other angle to it is, and why the Eagles are probably happy to make this call now, is they know that Josh Kennedy and probably Shannon Hearn are going to go within a year or two. Kennedy especially, and that frees up a lot of cap space. You know, Kennedy's not going to be replaced by a superstar forward because Oscar Allen's coming through. We've got halfbacks coming out of our backside to replace Shannon Hearn. So that money gets freed up, and then you can still go for a key recruit when those players retire, and you've still taken the pay cut now. So I think for the Eagles, they probably sat down and went, we're in a pretty good position to do this and still have the opportunity to go for a big fish, because these players are likely to say goodbye in a year or two.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And also, it does speak a little bit to the maturity of the group and the togetherness, because I actually spoke to Jaron Geary about this today. St Kilda have gone down a similar road in terms of the 7%. And so part of what the negotiation is that some players are eligible for a 3.5% pay cut and some get 9%, depending on your salary. So essentially it's the group coming together and saying, we'll all take a uniform pay cut. And that wouldn't necessarily be an easy conversation to have, because everyone's on different salaries and losing different amounts of money. Anyway, so that's a big tick for us. Just before we go, Garby, just in regards to the train-on players, just wanted to give a mention before we go. So there's 3 extras with the Eagles at the moment. Nick Martin from Subiaco, I believe, who's a forward. Cedric Cox, we know, played a bit of footy at Brisbane Lions. And Will Collins, who's a defender from the Swan Districts. If you're a betting man, do you think that we would add another player to our list via the supplementary player period?
No, it's hard to tell. I mean, it depends on how much they impress at training. Simo was pretty blunt about it when asked. He said, if they impress, they'll get a spot. If they're not up to it, they'll get a tap on the shoulder and we'll say thanks very much. Like, he was as blunt as that. That's how it works. The only player I've seen, and look, fans in the West may have watched the guys in the Waffle. I haven't seen them. But I've seen a bit of Cedric Cox because he played at Brisbane. He was a 20-ish number draft pick, around 24 or something like that. I imagine the Eagles ran their eyes over him because he came from the West, so maybe that's why he's got another crack at it. He didn't impress at all while he was at Brisbane. Like, he didn't stand out as a player who did anything, and he was given a few opportunities. He's a utility without too much pace. He can play up forward or down back. So, he's an option there as a stopgap at the bookends, if you like, if players started falling down. The others I haven't seen too much of. So who knows, mate? That's the short answer.
Yeah, and the other thing is it still looks possible that you'll be able to maybe pick up free agents at some stage during the season, especially if COVID starts to bite again at some stage. So there'll be opportunities for the Eagles to fill out their list if required. And also, just on that, great to hear that Dan Venables has actually been doing a little bit of stuff at training, as Steve told us. So light at the end of the tunnel potentially for Dan. It sounds like they're having to hold him back, which is good. So, it would be a big positive to see him back in full training at some stage.
Good to hear, mate. 5 weeks away from that opener against the Gold Coast Suns, which we can't wait for. Looking ahead to season 2021. No doubt we'll have some more Nest chats between now and then. Thanks, Drewy. Good to talk Eagles again as we build up to that big day. And, we'll look to preview the season, I dare say, a couple of more times before the ball is bounced for season 2021 for the Eagles.
Yeah, Garby, we've got a couple of guests in the works at the moment, so there should be plenty coming everyone's way on the Nest.
Good stuff. Thank you, mate. Thanks for listening, everyone. And get on the iTunes page, rate, review, subscribe, tell your friends, and we're all firing up for a big season for our beloved West Coast Eagles. Thanks for listening.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.